The summer of 1847 arrived in Greenwood Parish, Mississippi, like a slow suffocation. The air was thick with heat and the sweet, rotting smell of magnolia blossoms, and the land itself seemed to hold its breath beneath the weight of things left unsaid. In that season, a child named Isaiah Boon began to unsettle an entire county. Isaiah was 8 years old, born on the Callaway plantation near the edge of a Blackwater river that locals avoided after sundown. He was small for his age, narrow-shouldered, with skin dark as wet earth, and eyes so pale they unsettled people the moment they met his gaze. Those eyes did not wander. They did not blink when spoken to. They watched, steady and patient, as if waiting for truths to surface on their own. At first, Isaiah seemed unremarkable. He spoke little, worked quietly, and followed instructions with the calm obedience expected of an enslaved child. But the older women in the quarters noticed things before anyone else ever did. They noticed that Isaiah never startled, even when overseers cracked whips or shouted in sudden rage. They noticed that dogs refused to bark at him. They noticed that when someone fell ill, Isaiah would drift closer, sitting nearby without touching, watching with an expression far too old for his face. His mother, Ruth Boon, had tried for years to keep him unnoticed. She was a washerwoman, her hands always raw and bleeding, her back bent long before its time. She had learned early that survival depended on invisibility, but Isaiah resisted that instinct without meaning to. Things came to him uninvited. When he was 5, he told Ruth that the river spoke at night. When she hushed him in fear, he whispered instead. He said it didn't speak in words, not exactly, but in knowing, in weight, in memories that slid into his mind like water into cracks in stone. Ruth slapped him once, not out of anger but terror, and made him swear never to speak of it again. He tried to obey, but the knowing didn't leave. The first death came quietly, the way most inconvenient deaths do. Overseer Thomas Greer, a man known for his precision and cruelty, was found one morning face down in the cotton rows. No wounds, no sign of struggle, just a look on his face that made grown men avert their eyes. His mouth was open, his eyes wide, as if he had recognized something just before the end. Isaiah had watched Greer the day before. The overseer had paused while riding past the fields and looked down at the boy with open contempt. "That one's wrong," Greer muttered to another man. "Got a look about him." Isaiah said nothing. But that night he told his mother, very softly, that Greer would not wake again. Ruth shook him, demanded to know how he could say such a thing. Isaiah only replied, "The ground already knows him." When Greer was found dead the next morning, Ruth did not scream. She covered Isaiah's mouth with her hand and told him never ever to say things like that again. The plantation owner, Charles Callaway, dismissed the death as heat stroke, but something had shifted. Word traveled fast in places like Greenwood Parish, not in official channels, but through kitchens, smokehouses, and whispered prayers. People began remembering things Isaiah had said that no one had taken seriously at the time. A cough that sounded like rust inside the chest. A child who would not see another winter. A mule that would break its leg before the week was done. Isaiah was never wrong. It was Dr. Henry Whitlock who finally insisted on seeing the boy. Whitlock had trained in Boston and returned south for reasons he never explained. He was tolerated rather than respected, known for asking uncomfortable questions and refusing to treat enslaved people as animals. When he examined Isaiah, he found no physical abnormalities. The boy's pulse was steady, his breathing normal, his skull unremarkable, and yet Whitlock felt it, the same way everyone did, a pressure in the room, as if the air leaned inward toward the child. "What do you hear?" Whitlock asked gently. Isaiah considered the question. "I don't hear," he said. "I remember things that didn't happen to me." That answer stayed with Whitlock long after the examination ended. The second death was harder to explain away. Margaret Hollis, the wife of a prominent merchant, collapsed during Sunday service. She had been healthy, active, loud in her moral certainties. Witnesses said she clutched her chest, stared forward in horror, and whispered, "They're all here," before falling. Isaiah had seen her 2 days earlier while running errands in town. She had yanked his ear and scolded him for tracking dirt across her porch. He had looked at her and quietly said, "They don't forgive you." She had laughed. After her death, Greenwood Parish grew uneasy. People began avoiding the boy. Children were pulled away from him. Conversations stopped when he entered a space. Even enslaved people, who might have claimed him as their own, kept their distance. Isaiah noticed, but he did not complain. The river grew louder. By autumn, 5 people were dead, all respected, all powerful, all remembered by Isaiah with unsettling precision. He knew where their bodies would be found. He knew what expressions they would wear. He knew secrets that had never been spoken aloud. Dr. Whitlock began writing everything down. He tested Isaiah carefully, methodically, desperate for a rational explanation. He asked about diseases. Isaiah described symptoms weeks before they appeared. He asked about anatomy. Isaiah traced organs in the dirt, placing them with disturbing accuracy. He asked about the future. Isaiah went quiet. Some things aren't allowed to be said early, the boy explained. Whitlock's notes grew frantic. He wrote of intuition beyond probability, of perception without input, of a child who seemed to carry an archive of suffering not his own. The sixth death shattered any remaining pretense of coincidence. Judge Elias Crowley, a man whose rulings had condemned dozens to death or sale, collapsed during a sentencing hearing. Witnesses swore they heard him screaming before he fell, though his mouth never opened. When Whitlock examined the body, he found no cause sufficient to explain the terror frozen into Crowley's features. That same night, men came to the quarters looking for Isaiah. Ruth hid her son beneath the floorboards, pressing her body over the loose planks as boots stomped inches above her spine. She prayed harder than she ever had, not for mercy, but for silence. Isaiah did not move. He did not tremble. He listened. The men left, but the warning remained. Whitlock knew the boy could not stay. Under cover of a storm, Isaiah was taken from the plantation and brought to Whitlock's home near the river. Papers were forged, lies were told, risks were taken that could not be undone. "I won't let them kill you," Whitlock promised. Isaiah looked at him with infinite sadness. Some deaths don't need hands. The river swelled that winter. Floods came early, swallowing land and exposing things long buried. Coffins surfaced, bones washed free. The past refused to stay hidden. More deaths followed, but Isaiah was no longer present when they occurred. Still, the pattern held. Men who had built fortunes on suffering met sudden ends. Women who had ordered cruelty without lifting their own hands collapsed under invisible weight. Each death came with witnesses who described the same thing, the sense of being watched by many eyes. Whitlock feared he had not saved the boy, only delayed the inevitable. One night Isaiah walked into the river, not to die, to listen. When he returned, soaked and shivering, he told Whitlock the truth he had been avoiding. "The knowing doesn't belong to me," he said. "I'm just open enough for it to pass through." Whitlock asked what that meant. Isaiah answered, "It means I won't be here long." And that was when the story truly began to change.